It's time to look at rectangular lights. Okay, now often rectangular lights are used outside window openings to cast sort of daylight really into a space. They can also be used sort of on floors, on ceilings, to cast a general sort of directional light, unlike the Omni light, which sort of shines it all around, unless, of course, you've got a shade on it. So I'll just disable these lights first. So double click and then select one, right click, VRay for SketchUp, edit light, and then disable. Okay. So now if I do a render, we're back to blackness. Okay. So I have a rectangular light, this one here. So if I right click on that and unhide, then we can see what it is. So effectively this thing, if I just update scene 1, oops, that's back to scene 1, sorry, should have right click and unhide and then right click scene 1, update. I've just got a couple of scenes so that we can, I've put some extra sort of bally things in there and something we can view from the top. But scene 1 is that at the moment. Now these aren't going to work. So rectangular lights effectively are just created by using this icon, and then you click and drag. Let's see if we can do a better version of that. Then you click and then form this rectangle. So it's unlike a VRay plane where it creates a infinite plane in all directions. And also this is size dependent, because the bigger the sort of surface area of the VRay light, the more it's going to cast. So I'll just get rid of that for a second and go back to scene 1 where we're inside. So let's have a look at the settings. So right click on the rectangular light, edit light, and it's enabled. We've got quite a bright intensity, so scalar. It seems to work best for this type of light, but I'll show you what happens with other types. And I'll just knock it down to 30, which I think is its default value to start off with. Also, these things tend to be unticked, so double-sided means it's going to emit from both sides. There is an obvious right and wrong side, so the white side is the emitting side and the dark side is the non-emitting side. So invisible, so that's going to hide it. The decay option, if we had no decay, the lights would just kind of be much more intense. I'll show you that in a second. I don't know what that means. Ignore light normals or this light portal thing. Feel free to experiment with that. The subdivs value 8, that's going to affect the quality of it, and shadows turned on. So okay to that. Let's have a quick render to see what we get. So it's because it's sitting behind this edge, it's kind of giving you quite an intense sort of light on the edge, and then that's casting a shadow sort of up here and in this sort of corner. But it does give you sort of an even sort of light distribution throughout. So that's with decay turned, or with decay, should I say. Right click and then edit light. Let's just no decay it. Okay, and then render it again. So much brighter, because the light's just, you know, never ending effectively, I'm assuming. So it's just overblown. Okay, we'll take that as red. So right click and untick no decay. Double-sided means it's going to shine that side as well. I'll show you an example of that in the room, but we could have color. So let's just change that to maybe one sort of a neon-y sort of light, maybe bright up there. So okay that, and then render that out. So Halloween scenes and nightclub scenes, all this sort of stuff, just glows. That sort of colour, but you can put a texture behind it as well and create even more interesting effects. again, that's for you to play around with. Let's just reset this. Let's change it back to the white. Light portal, I have no idea, but if we just look at the units and the options that we've got. So luminous power, lumens, so I would say that's 1500 would normally be, so we've got a 30 at scalar. If I said 1500, then that would be about 100 watts of light, but it doesn't actually give us much, and it does create weird patterns as well. So it's much dimmer now with that 100 watt. You saw the difference it made to the Omni lights. And it's also created sort of an orb around there and an orb around there. Now I thought that might be because I had the Omni lights in, but it's nothing to do with that. It just creates these weird sort of shapes. And you'd have to crank this right up. So let's look at the other options. So luminance, we'll keep it at 1500 and render again. A little bit brighter. And then we lose those circle things. Okay, so right click again. Let's go to the next one down, radiant power in watts. Okay, that. Render again. Quite bright. And similarly, we don't have that shadowy thing going on. And finally, right click, edit light. Let's go down to radiance. Okay, render. Again, pretty bright. So I'll go back to the scalar value, 30. And I will create a new one. Okay, so I'll use this option, rectangle light. And this is size dependent. Okay, the smaller the light, the smaller the emitting surface, and then effectively smaller the output. Okay, now I don't want it buried in the floor either, so I'll just move this up so we can see what happens when we have single and double-sided turned on. So I'll just right click this time. We've got that value, we've got double-sided off, and we've got invisible turned, sort of not checked, so it's going to be visible. And we'll just see what happens with it. So render this. So there's our surface, and it's giving off light in this direction, creating a bit of a shadow underneath it. So it's basically an emissive surface which you can control. It can be really useful for all sorts of different things. Double-sided and invisible. It's going to give you this option. So can't see it. It's pumping out light up and down this time. So very handy for creating little lights in floors. If you just want something that's going to be an emissive surface, that's a square light, then it's perfect. If you wanted to use an omni light or a spotlight, then you don't see the light itself, and the problem is you have to create an emissive surface over the top of it from a material option within VRay. So I'll just get rid of this, and if I go to scene 2, so we can see the top of it. I think it's set to parallel, it doesn't matter. And go to the rectangular light again, and we'll pop one in to this corner here. And just move it up just a wee bit off the deck. So move that on the blue direction, say 5 millimeters. Then we'll edit this. And we will make it invisible. No, we don't want to do that. Double-sided. No, we don't want double-sided either. We'll have a color. So maybe some sort of purpley or pinky sort of wash. Like so. Let's maybe make it slightly brighter. So we'll have a 60 intensity. And let's say OK to that. Everything else I think is OK. And then if we go back to scene 2, if I just take that and copy it to the other end and divide by 20, let's say. So I assume we've got some sort of walkway lighting. Back to scene 1, so this should then show us what's going on with that. Let's see what we get. So we'll render this. We can see our little lights on the deck. Now this could be part of a more complicated sort of light fixing. There are loads of light fixings that are fittings, should I say, that you can get on the 3D warehouse. And maybe a sort of an aluminium or stainless steel sort of housing set into the ground. Then you've got some nice little effect. Okay, let's just change back to scene 2. Let's just select all of these for a second and let's see what happens. I could have used the outliner. Right click. Oh, I can't do it. I have to turn it into a component. So let's just do that quickly. See what happens if we turn the decay off. That's the only thing with this. You have to remember to make components out of these things. But no decay. Let's say OK to that. Let's take that down to maybe 10. I have no idea what's going to happen here, so I'll copy that back up to there and divide by 20. And then go back to scene 1. Have a quick render. And let's just see what happens. It's going to be madness. So even those little lights, or it might actually be, so I beg your pardon, it's just... Oh, this one's disappeared anyway, so we've lost that one altogether. So yeah, no decay is not really an option. Okay, so let's delete that. In fact, if I just make a component out of that, and then I can copy that, divide by 20, now I can zoom in on one of these, double click, select that light, then I can edit them all. No decay, turn that off, crank this back up maybe to 100 on scaler. Anything else we can do? Maybe bounce it off the ground as well, so double-sided, and this will be our last one. Go back to that, click on render, and then see what we get. Yeah, so interesting sorts of effects. So a little bit of fun and games with the rectangle light. So mostly used, I would say, for sending light through a window opening with a window frame and stuff in, so to replicate sort of daylight coming in, but also very useful for this sort of stuff. It creates a very nice emissive material, saves you having to do that, and ultimately sort of again gives you more control over the sorts of things that you can add lighting to. The main thing I would say is if you have a strip of these things that you want to control all together, then make it a component, and then it becomes much easier to sort out. Okay, so next up, spotlights. I will come back to that in a bit.